States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, David. I've got just a little short report, and then I'll turn it over to the Chancellor. I'd like to begin to say just by talking a little bit about City College San Francisco, something which we have spent a good amount of time over the last year and a half especially on, and we keep moving towards getting a healthy and good outcome for that college, which provides so many needed services to our residents there in the city of San Francisco. You know, there are many issues that are tied into it. You know, representing you as chair of this board, I've received quite a bit of communication. I stay current in terms of all the work that's being done with City College. And we are, of course, very interested as a board in getting things lined up, including returning authority and power to the Board of Trustees. And a difficult situation, being a trustee for the last 15 years, and Jeff Baum as well has served as a trustee for Community College. The responsibilities are fairly narrow, but very critical in terms of oversight. The work of trustee boards is not to be acting as we here are, to be acting as experts, but to ask tough questions and to ensure that the administration of the organization is adhering to all the policies and behaving ethically and morally and maintaining sustainability over a long period of time. So the decision to withdraw from authority and power from the Board of Trustees at City College was not one that was taken lightly, but it was one that was necessary in order to ensure that we returned the City College. And like I said, I've spent a lot of time on behalf of all of you on keeping up with the issues there with the Chancellor. But I have to say that there has been no better champion in terms of trying to get the City College of San Francisco back on track and in a healthy way than Bryce Harris. He has spent a great deal of time along with the Vice Chancellors in addressing all the various needs there, and they have been significant. We've been fortunate also to have a couple of people in Tyler and Bob Aguela there. But also, I think much credit has to go to City College staff and faculty because despite some resistance in certain areas, the collective faculty and staff have been very dedicated to trying to get things back on track. And I know that we will, and it'll get into a much healthier situation, even though we still have some challenges ahead of us. But I think under the leadership of Bryce Harris, we are very fortunate to have him to be able to really act on behalf of the system and specifically on behalf of City College. I've attended a number of things, events over the last couple of months. One that I was very fortunate to be able to attend, representing this board and the Chancellor's office, was at LA Trade Tech. President Obama was there making a speech on the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And I want to thank Vice Chancellor Van Tan Quinlivan for assisting me with that invitation, but also Chancellor Francisco Rodriguez and President Larry Frank, the president of LA Trade Tech, Board President Scott Zvonkin, the LA Community College Board. We're all very gracious, and it was a great opportunity for us to be showcased to the country for all the good work that is done, and not only at LA Trade Tech, but with the community colleges throughout the country, and very appreciative of President Obama's support for community colleges during his administration. I also was a panelist navigating the 21st century workforce that was hosted by Cal Poly Pomona and former Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis, and I specifically spoke about the work that we've been doing with the board of governors and the Chancellor's Office on veterans. So I updated the attendees there on that. I also attended the 30th anniversary of the Black Chamber of Orange County. Our former board member, Bobby McDonald, hosts that annually and presents a number of awards to people who have been involved in Orange County and have contributed much. One of those awards went to Nancy Montgomery of Irvine Valley, who is really one of the leaders in the state on veteran services, and the work that she does is outstanding. Her background is in nursing and health areas, and is doing, in addition to the work on related to that, her background, she's also very much the activist and the leader in providing services to veterans. And then the Chancellor and I, along with members of the staff, attended, we're in East LA, Patrick Perry, Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry, at East LA College for the system-wide goals announcement. Chancellor and this board approved. We were hosted there by President Marvin Martinez of East LA College. Chancellor Francisco Rodriguez was also present, along with Scott Svonkin, Mike Ean, who was also on the board of trustees of LA Unified School District, and Lamont Jackson, who's the student trustee there. David Rattray had joined us, and again, it was the announcement of our goals, which is very ambitious. I mean, that's part of our transparency, and I think that the Chancellor will talk a little bit more about that in just a second. I will be attending the Riverside Chamber of Commerce meeting, which is a very large gathering in October, with Lou Monville, who is the president of the CSU trustees. He's invited me to join him.
Former board member here.
And a former board member, thank you very much for that. Lou Monville, and Chancellor Tim White will possibly be there, Chancellor Harris has got a previous commitment, so I will be representing both he and this board at that gathering. And with that, I'll move on, Chancellor.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. Let me begin by thanking all of you. As all of us know, yesterday we spent a full day in retreat taking a look at the strategic plan of the system and the plan for our Student Success Initiative. It was a great day with an awful lot of information shared and great advice and counsel from the board on a number of initiatives. So we genuinely appreciate your willingness to participate in that, and we think it will have a tremendous impact on the future of the system. This is a great time of year for all of us. The last half of August and the first half of September are when students return to all of our colleges up and down the state, and I have had the pleasure of attending and making presentations at two of those return to school activities in the last couple of weeks, and I'm scheduled for one in Lassen next week. So I was pleased to go to Fresno City College and also to South Orange and specifically to Irvine Valley College to make presentations and really get an opportunity to interact with faculty and staff. It was those were great presentations, and I'm looking forward to my travel to Lassen next week. I have been participating as a representative for California Community Colleges in the American Association of Community Colleges task group on the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, and of course that's a big mouthful, but I will tell you the Higher Education Act is a critical piece of legislation for all of American higher education. And in the case of community colleges, there are some significant issues in the reauthorization that we are monitoring carefully. AACC, to their credit, brings folks from around the country into DC to talk about reauthorization, so they really do get a field level input, and it was a productive conversation, and I think we'll have a couple more of those before that act is ultimately reauthorized. As Dr. Baca said, we had an absolutely fabulous goals rollout activity in Southern California. Week before last. I can't say enough great things about the hospitality of President Martinez and Chancellor Rodriguez in the LA district. It was a wonderful day, great media coverage of your goals that you approved in July. And you know, it's you know, if you're not blowing up a building or building one up, it's hard to get the media to turn out. So it was really exciting that we had as much media coverage and exposure as we did over setting goals. I think what turned the tide was when they saw how ambitious the board's goals were, and that had a real impact on the media and certainly had an impact on the public when we were down in LA. We also, following the actual press conference, we had a statewide media press opportunity, and we had probably half a dozen to a dozen newspapers and radio and television stations represented on that as well. I was pleased last week to attend the Cal Chamber. I serve on that board representing California's community colleges, and that board meets 4 times a year, and it's a great opportunity for me to hear directly from the folks who receive our product, our graduates, and who put them to work. I think significant in this Cal Chamber meeting was, for the first time in a number of years, the Cal Chambers reactivated their education committee, their higher education segment, and they asked an executive from IBM and me to co-chair that committee. And I think that's a real testament to the work done by Bon Ton Quinlivan and our colleges over the past few years. The Chamber really does get the linkage between their workforce and our system. And so it was great. We had a full house at the first Education Committee meeting. The conversation was very robust, and we're looking forward to more of those in the future. Also been involved in the American Council on Education's task force on regulation of American higher education, or should I say over-regulation of American higher education. And that group is coming to California tomorrow to go to the Bay Area to meet with about 15 or 20 of our college leaders, and they're going to look at 3 specific areas. They're going to look at campus safety and security. They're going to look at specifically at financial aid and the financial aid regulations, and then they're going to talk with a number of CEOs about regulation in general of our colleges. It's going to be a really, I think, significant activity. It's the first time ACE has really reached out to our segment to get feedback from a large group of community college leaders. And so I'm looking forward to that. A number of our colleagues in those 3 areas, financial aid, campus safety and security, and the CEOs, have volunteered to come into San Francisco to that meeting tomorrow. And finally, it's a real pleasure for me to acknowledge in the audience today a colleague she and I go back a long, long way, but she's currently serving as the interim CEO of the Community College League, and I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Thelma Scott Skillman. Thelma, thank you. That concludes my report.
I just want to add one thing to my report. Personally, acknowledge and thank Paul Feast and Paige for the work that they did on the East LA rollout of the goals. I will now entertain a motion for consent calendar.
So moved.
Yes, Member Eslona.
Second.
Member Reed, second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to take a moment to ask about the 2 contracts related to the water crisis and understand a little bit about those 2 contracts that are $1 million contracts, and see how we're responding and preparing the state for this crisis.
We've got a couple folks coming to the podium to answer those questions.
Specifically, I was looking at number 2 and number 3 in those, and what they'll do and how they're relevant.
Vice President Baum, both these contracts are in the Workforce and Economic Development Division, so Vice Chancellor Bon Ton Quinlivan is going to help us with that.
So Yesterday we talked about having a sector focus, and one of the areas where we reshaped was a sector that became agriculture, water, and environmental technologies. So as a result, we had on-the-ground experts tied into our colleges and their respective curriculum. So as the drought issue evolved, one of our sister agencies called the Employment Training Panel, and Peter Cooper is here, wanted to deploy training dollars, tap into this network of colleges in order to help those, especially the San Joaquin Valley, with delivering on curriculum that can help with the drought issue. So it relates to water irrigation technology and some of the other areas that are listed in the item. So the good news is that they were able to leverage our network of colleges and tap into 6 colleges and their expertise in order to roll out these dollars. And that's item 2 and 3 are parallel. One is to accept the monies, and one is the authority to spend the money.
Well, I just was really pleased to see that we as a system can be nimble in response to a statewide crisis, and then at least do provide some kind of training that will help the state grapple. It's a drop in the bucket, well, bad term, but it's a drop in the bucket. But it's the type of thing that I'm hoping we're able to do more of, as well as this crisis worsens.
Thank you for your interest.
Reverend Belansky?
Can I ask a follow-up question, since I'm not aware of them, to say a little bit more about the California Employment Training Panel? Just to be a little more knowledgeable.
Absolutely. Let me invite Peter Cooper here.
Hi, so my name is Peter Cooper. I'm the Assistant Director at the Employment Training Panel. And the Employment Training Panel has been around for about 30 years when employers pay their UI taxes. When employers pay their UI taxes, they also pay employment training tax. This small sliver, which is about $7 per employee per year, goes into a statewide fund. And being the large state that we are, this adds up to between $50 and $120 million per year. Employers then come to our panel. It's a monthly panel. And they come with proposals for training that is then reimbursed through this fund. I have to say that this program is very accountable. It's a pay-for-performance system, which means that in our regular process, employers, and it could also be apprenticeship programs under a new pilot. It could be anything from Tesla and PepsiCo all the way down to very small mom and pop shops that need some support for training. I have to say it's very accountable in the sense that they are not reimbursed until they prove to our staff through reporting that training has actually occurred and that the trainees have been placed in a job for 90 days. So it's definitely not just handing out money. That being said, we do have some flexibility with what we call alternative funds. We've received these funds from the Energy Commission, for example, for electric vehicle infrastructure and other alternative funds. Recently, as was mentioned, we got funding through a drought omnibus legislation to help regions of the state most impacted by the drought. We have $2 million for this, which must be encumbered during this fiscal year. One of the problems, just quite honestly, with our program is being so accountable, it sometimes takes a while for employers to get through the process. And so one of the things that we decided to do was to bifurcate the $2 million. So take $1 million of it and really leverage and rely on the great structure that the community college system already has in place in the Central Valley, and working with your system navigator, Nancy Gutierrez. She's been wonderful in developing this proposal and this interagency agreement, I should say. And so this is an opportunity for us to encumber the money fairly quickly, but then have the flexibility to have it drawn down over 2 to 3 years and get the money out in the field quickly to help those that are most impacted by the drought. So it's really focused on those that are the regions, and not so much saying that those that are impacted by the drought will definitely be part of this program. So if you have any further questions, I can answer them afterwards or right now.
That's excellent.
Thank you all very much. Yes, Member Belinsky.
And I have one other question on number 1, around contract debt, and that it says that the grantee or the contractor will be able to provide information to other colleges and districts, and I'm just curious how that will get disseminated, because I suspect, given some experience I've had, that it's not all that easy to know how to do contract debt effectively. And if this Mount San Antonio district is going to do this, it'd be just at some point in time interesting to know how that will get disseminated to the districts so the districts would know how to do this more effectively.
We will,
Would you like me to answer that
yeah,
now?
do you have any specifics?
Yes. So in our Doing What Matters for Jobs and Economy structure, we are investing in sectors, regions, and then technical assistance to support their work. So the person being procured through this grant becomes a service provider to the field, is on call 24/7 to answer their questions. And then they're also going to be going out and having workshops and seminars to build the field's capacity.
And those will get widely published?
Oh, yes.
About the workshops, and will
Yes.
there be any kind of a guidebook or anything like that?
Yes, their work is to evolve what is already on the website, and then there's also a handbook on this.
I have
Thank
to
you.
get the website from you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you both very much. All in favor of the consent calendar, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, consent calendar is approved. We'll move on to action item 2. No. That's not. Action item 2.1, 2015-16 system budget request. This item requests approval of the proposed 2015-16 California Community College system budget request. And before we go on to discussion, if I could have a motion, please.
So moved.
Approved. Okay, Member Hawkins, second.
Second.
Okay, Member Sumner's second. Okay. Vice Chair.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. Dan Troy, our head of our finance unit, will give you an update on the budget and our system request. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Chancellor Harris, President Baca, and members of the board. Annually, the Board of Governors is required to provide a system budget request to the Governor's Office by September for aid in the Governor's development of the January budget proposal. To assist in the board's request, our office convenes a budget work group annually consisting of system stakeholders, more or less reflective of the consultation council makeup, to develop priorities for the board's consideration. So what you have before you today is the consensus of those work group discussions. To quickly summarize a few of the key issues, clear board priorities in recent years have been supporting student access and student success. So the work group clearly had those items in mind when putting together this request, and I think you'll find that the 4 key areas that this request focuses on include increasing access for community college students, funding student success and student equity, funding a COLA and going beyond that for a broader rate increase for community colleges to support the quality of services that colleges can provide to students, and a big focus on hiring more full-time faculty to, again, increase the quality of the instruction and support that our colleges provide to students. Briefly, I'll go over some of the key areas in the request. The first is access and enrollment funding. As you know, during the economic downturn, our colleges were forced to turn away students due to budget cuts. The 14-15 budget did include a fairly robust increase for access, about 2.75%, which can restore approximately 60,000 students as a head count to our system. We think we want to keep that momentum going and propose a large request of 2% in the budget year to ensure that students who can benefit from higher education, who need that support, will have a seat in a community college. Turning the page, we continue the momentum for the Student Success Support Program and the Student Equity Program. We're requesting $200 million split between the two programs this year. The Student Success and Support Program provides support to students through services such as orientation, assessment, placement, educational planning, counseling, and tutoring. It's a key element, of course, of the Student Success Task Force recommendations. We've been very fortunate in budget discussions to see that item increase significantly in recent years. We want to keep that momentum going. In the 14-15 year, the governor also proposed funding for student equity plans. These are local plans developed on the basis of district research intended to target the achievement gap that they identify at their colleges. These plans have been around for over 20 years. They've never been funded before prior to the 14-15 year. It's a flexible item that allows districts a lot of opportunity to meet their local needs to attack the achievement gap. So we think that's a great initiative on the governor's part, and we'd like to see more funding provided for that in the 15-16 year. The next item is the increase for general operations. During the economic downturn, for roughly 5 years, our colleges did not receive a cost of living adjustment, so the rate we received per FTS remained the same. So while you look at the charts, that looks like it wasn't a cut, but in reality, those costs go up every year. Costs for health bills, costs for utility, costs for IT, salaries, other forms of compensation. Looking ahead, not only do we have those costs continue, but we're being asked to, colleges are being asked to increase their STRS contribution rates very, very significantly in the coming years. So we think that we need to shape the community college budgets in order to be prepared to make those payments and not thin the quality of support and instructional services they provide to students. So with those areas in mind, we're requesting an increase in our funding rates that would total about $180 million. That's about 3% increase, and that is higher than the projected COLA for the coming year. A major priority for the work group was support for hiring full-time faculty. As you know, as we discussed a little bit yesterday in our retreat, we do have in our regulations the full-time faculty obligation number, or the FON as we call it. That is a measure that requires districts to essentially keep pace proportionally with the increase in credit FTS they serve each year. It does not push them forward to be able to actually increase the percentage of full-time instruction they have. It just merely allows them to tread water with where they were at in the past. So the group feels that that full-time faculty provide a lot of benefits to students there. There's continuity of instruction. They're involved in curriculum development. They're more able to be present for office hours and the like. And with that in mind, we think we should specifically ask for funding that would allow districts to increase their full-time hires. Additionally, in the 2009-10 budget, our categorical programs were cut dramatically, in most cases by about 40%. We lost over $300 million in key support services for our students in that year. There are a couple of programs that have been targeted for augmentations and or restoration in that time, but the vast majority of programs were not. So this request recognizes the importance of several of these programs, including EOPS, CalWORKS, the Basic Skills Initiative, and very crucially, many of our part-time faculty programs as well that support part-time faculty compensation, health insurance, and office hours. So it was very important to the work group that we request full restoration for the categorical programs that have not been restored since those 2009-10 cuts. A key board priority in recent years has been professional development. This is an item that was once funded in our budget but has not been funded for many years, by and large due to the state's economic condition. Given a lot of the changes that have gone on in the community colleges in recent years, we're seeing major increases in distance education. We've seen the Student Success Initiative We've seen the SB 1440 transfer degrees. We think it's crucial to be able to provide that support to faculty so that they could be up to date with these programs and to provide the quality of service and instruction to students that we need. I should say it's not just for faculty, it's for staff as well. So in addition to instruction, it would support quality support services for our students as well. In the current year, we received as a one-time allotment $50 million for the Economic and Workforce Development Program, which was also cut in the 2009-10 year. We're very supportive of this augmentation because I think it helps push forward a lot of the work that Chancellor Von Thun-Quinlivan has done in the field to really connect community colleges with their regional economic needs. We do believe that one-time funds is not sufficient to keep that going. So the group is requested $25 million in an ongoing manner so that these districts can bring these regional plans, put them in practice at the local level. In terms of technical assistance in the 14-15 year, our office was actually given $2.5 million in 9 new positions to provide support for districts on a variety of areas. This could be assisting them with their student success plans, with basic skills programs, or other fiscal support and programmatic issues. We think that this is an approach that allows us to not only do the monitoring and slap the hand when they do something wrong, but to have the actual support on hand for them to help fix problems in a proactive manner. With that in mind, we'd like to see that an augmentation to that program. Again, we received $2.5 million in the current year. We'd like to up that to $5 million in the budget year so we can support more districts as they implement dramatic change on their campuses. As discussed a bit yesterday at the retreat, about 10 years ago we received $2.8 million in the budget for the I Can Afford College campaign, which is a statewide outreach and marketing campaign that informs residents that community colleges are affordable and accessible, and that financial aid is available to pay for not only enrollment fees but other costs associated with attendance. That allotment has been frozen for 10 years. So over that time, we've had to reduce the markets we reach, as those costs have gone up. So this request for an additional $1.5 million would help us reach all markets throughout the state and also do more marketing in Spanish language, which has been tough to fund in recent years due to the stagnant funding. For the sake of brevity, I won't spend a lot of time on the one-time funding request. We do, the way the Proposition 98 guarantee works is that we're always looking at arrears to see whether that the state has funded that calculation, the way the revenues and the per capita income have panned out when the year passes. And when the state finds that they haven't funded Prop 98 sufficiently to meet that, we have dollars available largely for one-time purposes for support of our colleges. With that in mind, the work group looked at issues that seem appropriate for one-time funding expenditures since we can't rely on ongoing funding in those areas. So deferred maintenance and instructional equipment was a high priority area. Our 5-year capital outlay plans routinely show $200 million in deferred maintenance needs out there in the colleges. And certainly equipment can be funded with one-time funds at any time. The other area the work group felt strongly about was reimbursing districts for prior mandate claims. These are requirements the state imposes on districts. According to the Constitution, they are supposed to be funded for those costs, and the state routinely has deferred funding for those costs. According to the controller, we have over $260 million in backlog and unpaid claims, so if there's any one-time money available, that would be a good area to put it. This is not a formal funding request since it's not in our budget, but the work group did feel strongly that the state needs to make a bigger contribution to support Cal Grants in our state. It's worth noting that 2/3 of California's higher education students attend a community college. However, only 6% of the total funding awarded through Cal Grant goes to community college students. So we'd like to see a robust increase to Cal Grant Bs and Cs to support our students. Lastly, this is not a direct funding request, but it speaks more to the rather odd nature of our funding system. Our general apportionment has got several legs to it in terms of funding. Only one part of that is state appropriated general fund in the Budget Act. So that is the only stable and predictable source of funding we have to support our general apportionment. Otherwise, we're reliant on estimates of property taxes, estimate of fee revenues that come into the state. At the end of the fiscal year, if those estimates have come up short relative to what was anticipated in the budget, colleges can be left holding the bag and left with a deficit. We note that our brethren in K-12 do not have this risk. They have a continuous appropriation. So whenever they're short on property tax, the general fund automatically increases to backfill their funding needs. The community colleges do not enjoy that benefit. So we are requesting that the governor and the legislature come up with a way to provide predictable funding to the community colleges in a like manner. Not mentioned in the request, but included in the longer document that was attached last week, is it also a discussion of the adult education program. It's not mentioned specifically in this request as it's a joint program between K-12 and the community colleges. To support the consortium that were created through AB 86, we are requesting that the governor fund that program for $500 million. Obviously, only a portion of that would come to community colleges. Some of that would also go to K-12 adult ed instruction, but we think that's important to make a robust request in that case to support all the many adult education individuals who were pushed out of the system with the flexibility provided in the K-12 world during the economic downturn. So with that in mind, I'll wrap up to say that the budget request before you today, again, is a consensus document. We work with the system stakeholders to help reflect hopefully a broad array of the system's needs. We think it's an ambitious request, but not an unreasonable one, given the needs of our students and the needs of our colleges to support student success and the state's economic recovery. And with that, I'd ask for your approval today.
We have a
Before I open up for discussion, we do have some public comments. So, Vice President Baum.
We have 2 members of the public that would like to address the board from the stakeholder community. First is Jonathan Lightman from the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges.
Thank you, President Baca, Chancellor Harris, members of the board. Jonathan Lightman on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges, and I also want to thank Vice Chancellor Troy and his team. And I think he correctly characterized that this is it's a complicated process to involve all the stakeholders and to create a document that reflects the broadest swath of opinion. There are many strong statements and good concepts in this budget change proposal, including the request for an additional COLA, as well as economic workforce development. I do particularly want to emphasize the statement in here about full-time faculty as contributing to student success. And you may remember during some of the more contentious discussions on the student success document that was something that we had strongly emphasized and urged incorporation to the original student success report. We also believe very strongly, and it's in here, it's not couched, we believe, in a strong enough language, but the contribution of part-time faculty and part-time faculty support, particularly office hours, as a function of student success. We think that as we go forward in this budget process, that we have to recognize that while the governor does have his priorities, that the board needs to affirm very strongly its support for some of the important categorical programs, including those pertaining to part-time faculty, as well as EOPS, DOPS, and CalWORKS, as they have a long track record of achieving the student equity that is supported by the governor. The other point that I want to emphasize is there was a discussion yesterday about professional development, and Chancellor Harris correctly pointed out that in the corporate world, that it's not done as a function of amount of dollars dedicated, but rather as a percentage of budget. And this was actually, I mean, for you history buffs, was part of the discussions on AB 1725, the big community college reform. The original intent was to dedicate roughly 3% of the community college budget towards professional development, and this would be an ongoing function of our practice. It was opposed by the Department of Finance back in 1987, and we went with something like a $5.2 million line item that lasted until about 2001. We are requesting $25 million. I think that we need to engage the Department of Finance in saying that ultimately what we would like is a percentage of the state budget reflected in professional development. Otherwise, we encourage your support, and we look forward to working with you on passage of this document.
Thank you. Next is Fabio Gonzalez from the California Community College, EOPSA.
Fabio Gonzalez, Extended Opportunity Programs and Services Association President. Good morning, Chancellor Harris, Board President Baca, and honorable board members. I want to personally thank you on behalf of our 80,000 plus students that we serve through our program throughout California, and your continued support in restoring and continuous existence of our program. I really want to thank Vice Chancellor Troy for your support. And to those of you not familiar with the program, we've been in existence for over 50 years. We continue to provide the services that we need to provide to our low-income first-generation students. We continue to provide the service to those most in need. And I come to this board once again to ask for your support and to continue helping us on making sure that our program is being restored this year. And we are counting on your support. I also would like to invite you to our conference that is coming up right now in October. I'll probably go ahead and share that with you via email through Linda Michalowski and the Chancellor. And also to let you know that while we're happy of the support by the legislature and the support that we're getting today to restore the EOPS budget to our past levels of 2007, 2008, we're very disappointed on how we're being perceived. Our numbers continue to grow. We want to serve more students. Our students are knocking our doors. They want to become part of our program. Many of our programs have between 400 to 600 students waiting to get into the program, but we can't because of the limited amount of resources that we have. So we're asking for your support. We want this system to take a stand this year and really support the restoration of EOPS, DSPS, and the other categoricals that are devastated and waiting to provide the services that our students need. Thank you.
Okay, there's no other public comment, so we'll move on to board discussion here. Member Upside.
Yeah, Dan, we just got this 17-page memo, and I was wondering, and is there anything that was in that you didn't cover verbally, wasn't in our original written document?
I don't think so. I did point out the one issue of adult education, which we left out of the agenda item, as it was more of a joint K-12 community college issue than specifically a community college issue. I think what the broader narrative does is provide a little bit more background and context for some of the requests. It looks at some of the economic considerations for the colleges as we move forward, including the conclusion of Prop 30 beginning in the 2016-17 fiscal year. So we go into a little bit more detail on some of the cuts that we received in the prior years and why it's so important now to support community colleges while the revenues are much more robust.
Thank you.
But Dan, the recommendation to the board has not changed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Member Avalos.
Hey, Dan, thank you for the presentation. Quick question. So the request this year compared to last year, what's the % increase?
In the 14-15 year, we received approximately $600 million in programmatic increases. That's roughly a 10% increase. So if I do my math correctly, this would be a roughly 12% increase.
So when we look at that roughly $136 million increase that we're looking at, do we have a sense of what we're getting for that? I mean, obviously you can't answer it specifically, but I mean that's kind of what I'm looking for. When I look at student equity, it seems like your proposal is a $30 million increase. What's that mean, right? I mean, what are we getting for $30 million more? And then additionally, you know, how is student equity being allocated now?
Well, a couple of things. When the student equity, it's actually a $100 million increase. We received $70 million in the current year, so we're looking for a $100 million increase going into 15-16. So we'd be up to $170 million if this request is approved. The student equity program is new in terms of funding, I should say, and we do have a new allocation formula that Vice Chancellor Mike Lasky and her team put together. She called together a task force of community stakeholders to put that together. And the key factors I have summarized here include that there's a base per FTS amount so that every district is sharing in the benefit of the dollars. But otherwise, there's a variety of community and district factors that go toward the weighting to ensure that a somewhat disproportionate amount of the funds go to districts that have disproportionately high-need students and high-need communities. So some of the other factors considered include students receiving a Pell Grant as a measure of poverty, the educational attainment within the district boundaries, the participation rate in district boundaries, also the poverty rate and unemployment. Those are the factors considered. So this is intended by the governor's direction to be very much a locally driven project. Districts are supposed to do their own research in their communities to document underachievement by key demographic groups, including whites, blacks, Hispanics, veterans, foster youth. It runs, I think, the gamut of populations in a district, and to really look at research-based ways of attacking that achievement gap that they identify locally. Our office did put out some guidelines for districts in terms of the development of those plans, but I think it's important to remember that this is very much Governor Brown's idea that districts he wants them more in charge at the local level. He wants them to come up with their own unique programs that they believe will be effective in addressing their community's needs. So you'll probably find different answers at different communities as to what they do. Some may do summer bridge programs. Some may look at professional development. I think it's very much Governor Brown's idea to let locals figure it out for themselves.
Dan, it's a little hard to hear you, so when you can speak closer.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Members Budnick, Belansky, and Estolano.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I see what you're asking for in terms of categorical programs, but specifically as it relates to EOPS, are we getting back up to the 2007, 2008 levels that we're at before the recession? We learned yesterday in our retreat that other categorical programs had lobbyists and advocacy strategies and got back up to their levels, but we know that the low income and first generation and foster youth don't have lobbyists in the Capitol. So are we getting this program back up to where it was?
Yes. Yes, that is the intent of the request, is to restore the categorical programs, including EOPS, to the level, to their high watermark of funding prior to the 2009-10 cuts. So yes.
Great.
Member Belansky?
Before I ask or make my comment, I'll do a follow-up comment, though. The EOPS budgets, even when they were cut, were not what the colleges needed because they stopped putting money into them. And there was a base amount you were given, and even though you took on additional students, and it has been a very successful program, so I do think as we move forward personally, I think we need to advocate for money for that kind of cohort program, because students were doing the things we're asking for in the student achievement, of meeting 3 times a semester and having to go over their ed plan, having to get things from their instructors and bring to the, a lot of activity and work to keep the students very focused. The only other thing is I'd like to make a request, because it's not clear to me, and I had mentioned this previously, but in the student equity funding of asking for an increase, it makes the comment that the allocation of it will be based upon, if I'm reading it correctly, the student equity plan that's submitted and then some data from the plan. It'd be nice to see exactly how that's going to be allocated, what the formula looks like, and to see it in writing, just for more knowledge, because if it's solely based upon the data the districts give, I'll get skeptical.
And Member Polanski, that information has been provided to districts. We could send it to the board
It'd be nice
as
to
well. And you noted that you're concerned that all the data would be that provided by the districts. It's actually a combination of community factors, which the districts obviously don't report their own unemployment factor. That's a state factor that we look at, or it's rather a local factor that we look at through state resources. So it's a combination of state sources and local resources as well. So
Okay.
if we can get the full information
I think
to you.
that'd be helpful to
Yes.
have.
Member Stolano?
Thank you. On the funding for full-time faculty hiring, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the explanation clearly. So we learned yesterday that though there is this goal to have 75% full-time faculty, every college is starting at a different base, right? So though they're supposed to maintain their same proportion, some are starting at a lower base or a higher base. So I'm understanding the explanation on the second paragraph to mean that if we get this money, the 70 million, it'll be allocated so the ones that have the lower percentage of faculty full-time hiring would get proportionally more money. I'm just trying to understand how it would be allocated to try to bring everybody up closer to the 75% ratio.
We have the broad goal of increasing funding so that districts can hire more full-time faculty and make more progress toward increasing the percentage of full-time instruction in the system. The proposal we have in mind here is to actually give districts essentially a per FTS increase, but ratchet up the requirements to hire full-time faculty on a weighted basis. So the districts that are kind of on the low scale would have a higher requirement to hire more full-time faculty. The districts on the high end would have less of a requirement to do that. So I think that we feel that that's an equitable proposal. If we simply gave money to districts that were on the low end, then it would in a way be penalizing the districts that have already met those goals over time, and we didn't think that that was equitable.
Okay. Then just a minor point, because from a budget standpoint, it's pretty small. The public outreach, 1.5 million, is being proposed to all be allocated to the I Can Afford College campaign, and understand why. But I was struck yesterday about the outreach campaign that really doesn't have any funding, which is the degree with the guarantee. And was there any thought about at least trying to jumpstart a little bit of money for that and try to get matches someplace else?
Yes, well, last year we actually had a joint request with CSU, and that was not Prop 98 dollars, that was
Okay, right.
general fund dollars. It was not met warmly by the governor's office. The governor's not terribly fond of PR, it turns out. But that does not mean that we won't continue to pursue requests for funding in that regard with our partners at CSU.
All right, thank you.
Member Van Loon?
Yes, I would like to advocate for extra funding for the part-time faculty. It seems like we don't have strong enough language, and I'd like to reinforce what was stated in the public comment in regard to part-time faculty and their role in student success. As of right now, generally, a student has to make an appointment with adjunct faculty or part-time faculty to meet with them for help in regard to the subject matter. And whereas full-time faculty, their office hours, they're sitting on campus, and as a student, you don't want to inconvenience your teacher and ask them for an appointment to travel all the way to campus just to meet, to get help. Increasing funding for them to have specific office hours and staying on campus for those specific office hours is extremely vital for student success, and I'd like to see a little bit stronger language and stronger advocacy for part-time faculty in that regard.
Okay, thank you. we can certainly keep that in mind in our advocacy efforts.
Yes, Member
I have one
Ramos.
final comment. So I think technology is really important, obviously, and how do we leverage technology is critical. And the question is, in this budget, is there a way to think about, is there funds that we can set aside that really think about how do we leverage technology throughout the community colleges in California? I know there's different projects going on at different levels, and maybe it's already layered in here, the technology, best practices, or just leveraging technology to make it more efficient for counselors or efficient for staff or wherever it may be. But I think that's something that we should really think about, and I don't know if it's in the budget proposal.
It is not laid out specifically for it. Certainly to the extent that we increase the general operation funds for districts, part of that consideration is how they implement IT and fund their needed IT services on campuses as well. That's obviously a growing need as time goes on for districts. So there's nothing specific that calls that out. I will say in recent years our office has been funded and continues to be funded to engage in some centralized IT projects that I think create great efficiencies throughout the system, such as e-transcripts, the online education initiative. We're developing a common course management system that all districts can leverage, and that saves them local resources. So we do have a variety of projects underway looking to leverage system resources to create savings for districts.
Yeah. And is that something we don't want to call out specifically to set budget aside for something like that, or
Well,
because I
it's
mean,
not,
from my perspective, it feels like we can't hire our way through this, right? Because it's it's a scalable issue, and so only through technology can we really meet the demand of future students as we start to think about access and open access for more students. It's really to technology that we become more efficient and effective.
Yeah, note that this is an incremental request, so to the extent we already have funding in our budget, it's built into our base, but there's no specific request for increased funding for those projects in this request.
I would just remind the board that we have three huge previously funded projects underway. One is the online ed initiative, the other is the common assessment, and finally the online ed planning. So part of the reason you don't see anything new in here is because we're right in the middle of those three statewide projects, and our ability to manage more of those projects of that magnitude would be a challenge for us. So until we get those projects a little further down the road, you probably won't see another separate funding request. You do, as Dan pointed out, there's technology built into all these requests. It's just you don't see them called out.
Vice President Baum.
And if I recall, we recently received the report on T-TIP as the technology investments up and down the state, but districts are, it's a good question because districts do struggle, and there's a wide inconsistency up and down the state on how districts employ technology into their operations. And Pasadena suffered through the Santa Clara system for 26 years before shifting and investing millions of dollars into a new enterprise resource system to serve students, and it would be great if there's continues to evolve so that this statewide there's some best practices that can be applied and leveraged so that and managed. You'd think with the power of 172 districts too, you can make some powerful innovations there.
Member Sumner.
The budget, sometimes you look at it and it's very, very overwhelming when you look at the numbers of millions and billions of dollars. But what stands out to me is the professional development. I think that really is the driving force, because when you look at the last sentence, it just talks about without sufficient resources allocated for training new and existing faculty and staff, who's going to be training them? They need the hours, they need the tools, because all I hear when I talk with some instructors or teachers and students, they'll come up to me and they'll say, we don't have the time, we don't have the money, they make it mandatory classes, it's a 4-hour class, but they'll give us a half hour, we do it on our lunch break. That's not quality we're looking at numbers of students. We really have to look at the quality of training for the professionals that are going to be doing the teaching and give them money. So when I look at the budget, I see $25 million, that's just, pittance. So how with the new guidelines and regulations coming down, especially like with some of the sexual assault, trauma, different things that are happening in the schools and facilities now, what are we going to do for that? Because I think it's really important, especially safety in schools and training.
agree completely, and certainly in the context of the needed professional development. $25 million may be a drop in the bucket, but note that we are on a state basis. We are going from zero. And it hasn't been funded in many, many years, I believe over 10 years now in the budget. So hopefully this is just a start. And of course, there's an expectation that local districts are expending some of their own funds on professional development as well. So, mindful in any request that we do that there's a variety of competing needs and interests that we want to fund. And if we were to increase the professional development funding, we'd have to decrease something else. So this is what the stakeholders came up with as a consensus.
Any other discussion, comment? There being none, all in favor of action item
Do we have a motion?
2.1, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to action item 2.2, attendance accounting regulations and service training. This item requests proposed changes to California Code of Regulations, Title V, Sections 58006 and 58051 to allow community college districts more flexibility in computing attendance for public safety in-service training courses. I'll entertain a motion. Member Hawkins first, and Member Lansky second. Discussion, presentation first.
President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris, the item before you is the second reading of this proposed regulation change regarding attendance accounting for public safety in-service training. This was discussed at the last board meeting. The change would allow colleges to use methods of attendance accounting other than positive attendance to keep track of student participation in courses. This is particularly aimed at opening the door for colleges to use various forms of online training to help public service entities such as sheriff's departments, police departments, fire departments. Since the first reading of this item, we did receive public comment, one comment in support, and with that, we're bringing it back to you for a second reading and for your approval and adoption pursuant to the resolution that's included in the board item.
Any discussion, questions, comments? There being none, all in favor of action item 2.2, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And action item 2.1 is approved. We'll move on to action item 2.3, credit course repetition regulations. This item requests changes to the regulations governing the types of courses that a district can properly designate as repeatable have resulted in students not being able to repeat general work experience courses. Proposed changes would permit students to be able to repeat all cooperative work experience courses. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Member Solano. Second. Member Van Loon, second. Presentation, discussion.
This also is a second reading of this proposed regulation change. That in 2011 and 2012, the Board of Governors placed new restrictions on the ability of students to repeat courses. This change is intended to allow expanded use of work experience, general work experience, to help students pursue educational programs. So this would provide a specific exemption for repetition in these general work experience courses. This work experience is used as a means to allow students to develop expertise, often along different career path training programs. Since this item was brought to you for your first reading at your last meeting, we've received 3 public comments, all in support of the item. And so with that, it's coming back to you for your proposed adoption and approval, again pursuant to the resolution that's included in the board item.
Thank you. Any discussion, comments? Member Belinsky?
Once this is approved, what will be the effective date?
We will submit it to Department of Finance. We'll wait for Department of Finance to determine whether or not to sign off on it. And once they do, we will immediately file it with the Secretary of State and lodge it with the administrative law, and it will be effective 30 days thereafter. So that's a long way of saying, I don't know. It really depends on how long it takes the Department of Finance to sign off on the regulation.
But some kind of memo will go out then.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bottom line is the regulations are crafted to take effect immediately, but what that means in our context is it has to go through hoops with various agencies. Once that takes effect, the field will be notified.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there being none, all in favor of action item 2.3, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Action item 2.3 is approved. We'll move on to action item 2.4, bond fee waiver regulations, ineligible student. This item requests a proposed change to add section 58629 to the California Code of Regulations, Title V, to permit a district that erroneously awarded the Board of Governors fee waiver to an ineligible student to waive the student's repayment of the waived enrollment fee under specified conditions. I'll entertain a motion. Member Lansky, first. Second. Member Hawkins, presentation discussion.
President Baca, members of the board, this item would make a small change that would authorize community colleges to waive the collection of enrollment fees from a prior term in cases where the student did not pay those fees because they were awarded a BOG fee waiver through an error that was not the fault of the student, and for the student to be required to retroactively pay those fees would cause a financial hardship. This does not require districts to do anything, but it would simply give districts a tool to be able to waive fees in those narrow circumstances when they do occur. There's a comparable provision regarding non-resident tuition in another section of the regulations, and this would conform the resident fee provisions to that same exception.
Discussion, comments?
And this goes through the same review process.
Correct.
Any other comments, questions? There being none, all in favor of action item 2.4, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, action item 2.4 is approved. We'll move on to action item 2.5, Board of Governors appointment to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. This item requests approval of the Board of Governors appointment to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And before I ask for motion, the staff has entertained a number of candidates for this BOG appointment. I am recommending that we approve Catherine Brown. I give you some background information here. Catherine Brown is the program coordinator of the Early Childhood Education Department and is a tenured professor at Skyline College. She has been teaching at California Community Colleges since 1990, teaching at Canaria and Foothill and De Anza colleges in early childhood and child development. Her education background includes BA in psychology with honors from Sanford University, MA in early childhood education, from University of Michigan, elementary certification K-6 from Michigan, multiple subject credential K-12 from California, California Community College credential. As the coordinator of the San Mateo region of the California Early Childhood Education Mentor program, Catherine has expanded the number of mentors fivefold and has worked with centers throughout the region to bring experienced teachers into the mentor program. She helps mentors link with the student teachers from Skyline, Canaria Colleges, San Francisco State University, and local ROP tech prep programs. Additionally, Catherine is the author, with Ann Gordon, of several early childhood education textbooks. I'll entertain a motion to approve this appointment.
So moved.
Member Reed, Member Epstein, presentation discussion.
President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris. As you might recall, last year the board sponsored legislation, SB 576, co-sponsored actually with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. This would fill the appointment of the Board of Governors to add an individual who had previously been the appointment of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission. Since that commission is no longer in existence, we felt that this would be a terrific appointment to make to the commission, given the number of paraprofessionals going into teaching that are educated by our colleges and universities.
Vice President Baum.
The candidate being proposed sounds terrific, but I'm a little confused about the process. And so, because also it was at times when the board has had a chance to make an appointment to another body like CPEC, the board appointed one of its own members to CPEC, for example, and I was the representative to CPEC. What was the philosophy behind the outreach and the selection process for this appointment?
So the philosophy was really to follow the model of the appointments for the University of California and the California State University. Those appointments have folks who are from the field, who are generally either with the system offices or from campuses. So we did advance 3 candidates who are from our colleges who are directly involved with paraprofessional programs in early childhood education. So the idea was to find those folks who have that level of expertise who could then serve on the commission, which is generally the makeup of the commission. They tend to be more practitioners than they are board members, either through this body or the Board of Trustees or the Board of Regents.
And then, and the other thing, it sounds like, again, we solicited and identified a very qualified appointee. But as a member of the Board of Governors, was there a reason the board wasn't asked to also contribute suggestions for consideration?
Well, the process that we had followed in this instance was to identify 3 candidates and then to have the president of the board, Dr. Baca, review those candidates and have some conversation, which I was under the impression took place with the members of the board to then determine which of those 3 would be selected.
Yeah, and I may have failed to actually follow through with that process, and you know, I interpreted the recommendation to be mine, and so, you know, in the future I think we'll need to clarify that process to make it more clear that, and that's one we use. So I do assume some responsibility for that, and just in interpreting it, that it was a recommendation I could make to you.
Yeah, let me assure the board there's no cookie cutter way of doing this. In fact, we began by making a single recommendation to Dr. Baca. He asked to see more candidates. We provided those. So this is the kind of process that can be quite cumbersome if we use that approach. As Vice President Baum pointed out, if this were a CPEC appointment, it would be probably a member of this board, and it would be a much more robust conversation. This particular commission certainly does not have the level of importance that you would have had with an appointment to CPEC.
And I will make available the other recommended candidates to all of you.
Sure. And my sense is just, I think that this board is very interested in the professional credentialing of instructors up and down the state, and so, and I don't know how often do we anticipate this commission meeting, and how will we hear back as to be reported back as to the workings of the commission?
So my recollection is the commission meets every other month, but I will double check that. And again, if it was a failure of communication on my part, I certainly apologize that in terms of
yeah.
the process. But yeah, I believe they meet every other month, but I'll confirm that and get back to you.
And my last point is just that I hope, like anything that we have an appointment to, that there's a reporting back to the Board of Governors, so that if we're represented on that commission, we actually know and can actually help articulate certain priorities of our system to our appointees or our nominee, so that they can carry out what the system, that their priorities and their carrying out their duties are aligned with what we've identified as system-wide priorities. For example, and like we've talked a lot about professional development, and want to ensure that what we talk about professional development makes its way through teacher credentialing. That's all.
Okay, Member Lansky.
Is this a specific term of office, you know, to a specific date, or is it just an unlimited term?
Generally now, there are unlimited terms. This particular term, however, would cease to be a Board of Governors appointment should an organization like CPEC be restored, then the CPEC appointment would return.
But this individual will be on until this individual makes the decision to resign.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Member Solana, did you have something to add to that?
That was my question. What's the term? That seemed very odd to me. There should be a specific term.
Member Malumin?
I agree with Member Baum. I think the board would like to be involved in the future, and I'd like to hear from Member Reed. Weren't you on this commission?
Well, during the time that I was there, it was specific terms, and I believe we met every month for as many as 3 days at a time.
Mhm.
So it may have changed over the last 20 years, but, not saying that I've gotten older, but, when we met, it was, monthly. Yes.
Just
And-
is-
and we had
Is
specific
it like some of the other professional commissions that actually review appeals to
Yes.
withdrawal of accreditation, that type of
Yes.
thing?
We not only set the standards, we reviewed,
Because didn't the nursing one get a complete clean slate because of some
Mhm.
concerns about how nursing is being
Well,
regulated?
I'd also like to meet the person, so maybe we should invite her to future board meeting and get to know the person.
Okay,
I mean,
yes.
just one other question. So
Mhm.
did you guys solicit nominations from campuses? Or how did you get the 3 names?
So the process that we followed is we worked with staff here in the Student Services Division.
Okay.
And we did solicit names from colleges, and we looked for folks who had particular expertise in terms of working with early childhood education programs. Not only folks with expertise, but also folks who had the ability and the time to come to Sacramento and serve during the commission meetings, but also do the work in the interim so that they could be full contributing members.
My request out of this just would be that
Sure.
if we could work with the chancellor and also identify the other areas where the Board of Governors makes discretionary appointments, so that we can all kind of understand. We have 2 appointments to the foundation, for example. We used to have one to CPAC. We now have one at credentialing. Are there any others? And try to develop a consistent process by which we make those appointments.
Yes, I get the gist of the board's interest, and so I will work with Chancellor Harris on coming back to you with a recommendation as to the process, that not only with this kind of appointment, but any appointment that receives, that needs or requires board approval.
And then invite our
And then we'll
appointees to our next board
certainly
meeting.
make a point of doing that. Any other comments or questions?
No.
There being none, I will ask for your approval on action item 2.5.
I'm sorry, I do have another question.
Sure.
What if we are not happy with the person that we do appoint? Do we have a chance to ask them to step down, just in case?
You know, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will talk with the commission and take a look at their bylaws in terms of service on the commission and what's the process by which if folks are either removed or resigned or asked to step down.
Is there an urgency? Could we wait a meeting? I'm just wondering.
There is a little bit of an urgency insofar as the legislation that authorized this appointment was passed last year, went into effect in January. So we have not had an appointment on the commission since that time. Part of the delay was going through the process of identifying qualified candidates and then getting them notified, sort of briefed on the process, and then getting it scheduled for one of our board meetings. So there was a little bit of a lead-in time that led to the delay.
But November would still be this year, I'm just saying.
Certainly, if the board's pleasure is to put off until November, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Is that your interest?
No, I'm just thinking about it. Did you meet this person? Did you
I'm
meet
not.
our candidate?
No, I haven't. I was made aware of her background and the background of the other candidates.
Would you think that you would like to delay it? I'm just asking. Or shall we?
I would prefer not to delay it.
Okay.
I think it would be a very good idea, as we're discussing this, that future appointments be handled differently.
Okay.
That's my position on it, but
Okay.
I'm open to the wishes.
I'm willing to defer to the recommendation of the chancellor and the vice chancellor that you're making, but ensuring that we will have an opportunity to meet this person and interact with them, as well as kind of formalize the process by which we make appointments.
And then specific to this appointment, I would like a report back on the term of office and maybe even, and how do we terminate?
Yes,
I mean, certainly, like, what if this appointee never shows up to the meeting? Right, so just something on the mechanism. But particularly the term, it seems odd to me that there would be an unlimited term in this appointment.
What are your wishes? Call the question. All in favor of the recommendation, action item 2.5, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. One nay. And Loon, any abstentions?
I abstain.
Abstain. Member Avalos? Member Hawkins?
I'm going to change to abstention. Yeah.
Abstention?
I'll change to abstention.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have
How many votes?
eight votes in favor, one nay, and 3 abstentions. Action item 2.5 is passed. Now we'll move on to first reading, Board of Governors meeting dates for 2016, item 3.1.
Thank you, President Boger, members of the board. I'll ask Deputy Chancellor Skinner to address this in detail. It is behind the tab on first reading, and you will see the Board of Governor meeting dates on page 56. Eric?
The item before you is the adoption of meeting dates for 2016. This is part of the annual process for planning to identify the meeting dates for the coming year. So you can see before you the proposed schedule. No significant changes. It reflects a continuation of the recent changes been made this year to push some of the meeting dates later in the month, and that it would continue forward with that tradition. Otherwise, it's simply an extension of the current structure.
Yeah,
Member Avalos?
I actually want the November date. Maybe we can change that. It falls actually on Thanksgiving week.
That's
And
not
so
a good
that
term.
wouldn't work for, most of the people who have children because, they're in school, they're out of school that time. So if we can change that date for November, that'd be great.
It's the prerogative of the board, absolutely.
agree.
This is just a conversation starter here, so.
And you're interested in moving to what date?
Either the week before or the week after. I'm okay with that, just, not on Thanksgiving week.
Okay.
I agree.
Yes.
Vice President
I
Baum?
have a question. Traditionally, we usually met earlier in the month, but we decided to move the meeting in May and November. May because we wanted to have an opportunity to meet after the May revise came out, to be informed by that. In November, we often were meeting before an election or on election day, and we wanted to move after that. Now it looks like we're consistently moving to mid-month, and is that the direction that we're going? I'm agnostic. I was just wanted to say is that we're going to try to look at that. Does it help the system in any way to manage the meetings in that?
It doesn't make a significant difference for us. What we're trying to provide for the board is a level, and all the constituent groups, is a level of consistency from a planning point of view. But this far ahead, if the board wants to move any of these, they certainly can do that.
Yes, Member Epstein?
Yeah, I agree with Member Avalos, but I also want to know for the 2015 calendar, which isn't in here, is that also on Thanksgiving week?
It's in the.
It is in there?
It's on the very first page,
The,
but I don't think it is.
yeah, 2015 is on 16-17, which is the week
Week
prior
before,
to
okay.
Thanksgiving.
Where is that?
It's,
Oh, the very first page of the
Says-
whole
Yeah,
book.
page
Oh, the
one.
whole book, okay,
Page
yeah.
one of the-
So Member Avalos, I would, on November, I would recommend we just move that to the 14th, 15th, rather than the Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that would make sense. Whatever you guys want.
Member Hawkins?
Yes, typically the November meeting is our out-of-town meetings. I just wasn't sure moving it earlier was better than moving it after the holiday.
Yeah, I think moving it earlier would be better in that
Yeah.
regard, yes.
That's what I was going to say.
So
Any
at this
other-
point, we're going to, this is a first reading, so this will come back to you, but we're tentatively gonna reschedule that for 14-15 and we'll look and see if there's anything else. I don't think there is, but.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. We'll move on to nomination of board officers, item 3.2. This item calls for the nomination of board officers for 2015. Nominations are now open for the office of president.
I'd like to nominate Jeff Baum for president.
Okay, Member Reed and Member Estolano, a second. All right, Jeff Baum is nominated. Are there any further nominations for office of president? Okay.
So close the nominations.
Yes.
Move to close.
Are there any further nominations for president? Okay, nominations are closed. Nominations are now open in order for the office of vice president. Yes, Vice President Baum.
I'd like to nominate Member Estolano for vice president.
Okay, Member Estolano, second. Member Hawken.
I'd like to nominate Joseph Belinsky Jr. for vice president.
Okay, so we have Member Estolano and Member Belansky for for the office of vice president. Are there any other nominations for vice president?
That requires
Yeah, we should get a second probably on each one. Second for Member Solano.
I second that.
Okay, Member Avalos. Second for Member Belansky.
I'll second it.
Okay, Member Malumed. Okay, again, for the office of vice president, we have Member Estolano and Member Belansky. Any further nominations for vice president? There being none, nominations are closed. Okay, we'll move on to information reports, Foundation.
President Baca,
Yes.
quick question. This is just a process question. For all of our action calendar, making the motion or asking for a motion before, I'm not sure what the motion is. When someone says I'll make a motion, then I'll second it because no one said what the motion is. And does it make sense making the motion and seconding a motion that's probably to accept what the action calendar is before we've heard the comments or the presentation, before there's been public comment? It just seems to me like we're pushing something through before we've heard about it or heard from the public about it. I'm just not used to making the motion and seconding it before we actually, normally that would happen after the presentation or if there's any public comment, someone would make a motion, second, and then the vote. So I just wonder, is this what has always happened?
Well, it depends on the meeting, but.
Yeah, I think the different chairs have handled it different ways to answer your question.
But do we allow public comment on every action item if there is public comment?
Yes, if there's any.
But does it not feel, if we're doing it this way, and there is public comment, that we're actually, two people are voting aye before the public has even had a chance to weigh in?
Well, the
I don't
vote's
think the
not
nomination
taken.
is.
Well, the motion is to accept the action item, right?
Yes.
So those two people are voting, saying aye, before we've heard a presentation and before the public's got a chance to speak. Correct?
But you can vote nay.
No, that.
So you're making a motion to accept the action.
And
staff
then the public
recommendation.
comment takes place, and then the vote takes place after that.
Got it. Okay.
Now, but your point is well made. This board has in the past occasionally had the public comment and the presentation of the item, and then made the motion. So it's been done both ways, to answer your question.
I think I'm just sensitive on being a body that's very responsive to teachers and students and people that care, that we're listening first and then making a decision after that. So
Well, you know, if the body did not want to discuss this, there has to be an opening in order to there be a discussion. But if it's the preference of the board to handle it that way, we certainly can do it that way.
I prefer that, but this is not going to fall on my sword on this one.
Okay.
I think
Typically,
these
it's up
meetings.
to the
I think
chair
these
to
meetings are very
introduce
well
it.
run and efficient, but I just.
But
that's
I
one
think it
suggestion.
just, there should be an opening of the item in order for there to be discussion. And one could look at it, well, there was no interest in opening up this item, so we may not discuss it. But, you know, we'll take that into consideration and.
Thank you.
For the next meeting. All right? Okay. You want to take a little break? Let's take a 10-minute break.